I don't know what's more terrifying, the moment of death or the truth I witnessed afterward. One moment, I was lying on my deathbed, feeling my body grow weightless, drifting into darkness. The next moment, I found myself standing before a reality more horrifying than anything I had ever imagined. I was dead, and what I saw beyond the veil of life sent chills down my spine. A powerful light appeared, but amidst its brilliance, I didn't just meet Jesus. He revealed to me something that had never been disclosed before, the terrifying truth about the Antichrist. We have heard of him through prophecies, stories, and predictions in the book of Revelation. But I must tell you, the truth is far more terrifying. The Antichrist is not just an abstract concept or a distant figure of the future. He is here, among us, infiltrating minds, manipulating, controlling, and preparing for a plan darker than anything ever imagined. Jesus lifted the veil so I could see everything. And now, I am here to share it with you. Are you ready to face the truth? Do you dare to receive the message I have brought back from beyond death? Leave your comment below, because what I'm about to reveal may change everything you've ever believed. Hello, my name is Barbara. I never imagined my life would end so suddenly. It was a cold January evening in 2025, and I had just finished grading a stack of assignments. The road ahead was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. The headlights came out of nowhere, a deafening crash. My body jolted forward, then silence. A darkness deeper than anything I had ever known wrapped around me. I should have been terrified, but instead, there was a strange stillness, until I realized I was no longer in. I was float below me. I saw the wreckage, twisted metal, shattered glass, the crumpled remains of my car. And there, in the driver's seat, was me. Oh, I wanted to scream, to reach out, to move. But I was weightless, untethered from the world I had always known. As the sound of sirens grew distant, another sensation took over, a gentle pull, like an invisible thread drawing me upward. It was subtle at first, but then it became stronger, undeniable. I turned my gaze upward and saw it. A tunnel of light stretched endlessly above me, swirling with an ethereal glow. It was mesmerizing, unlike anything I had ever seen before. But before I could take it all in, the pull became a force. I was being drawn in, lifted toward something greater, something beyond human understanding. Yet, just as I surrendered to the journey, a whisper brushed against my ear. "Barbara, don't go." The voice was low, guttural, and filled with something sinister. I turned my head and saw them, dark, shadowy figures, lurking at the edges of the tunnel. Their outlines flickered like smoke, but their eyes burned with an unnatural hunger. I felt their presence clawing at me, their whispers growing more insistent. "You don't belong there. Come back. It's not real." Their words slithered through me like venom, filling my mind with doubt. Panic surged through me as I realized they were reaching for me, long claw-like hands stretching out, trying to drag me away from the light. I struggled, resisting the pull of their darkness. But for every inch I moved forward, they pulled harder. Fear wrapped around me like chains. Was this my fate? Was this where I truly belonged? Then suddenly, everything changed. A burst of pure, radiant light erupted in front of me, so powerful that it sent the shadowy figures recoiling in agony. And in the center of that light, I saw him, Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, his face radiant with a love so deep so consuming, it made my soul tremble. He reached out a hand, and without hesitation, I grasped it. The moment our hands touched, warmth flooded through me, melting away the fear, the doubt, the pain. I knew in that instant I was safe. "Come," he said, his voice like music, like the purest harmony of truth. As he guided me further into the light, I saw the truth laid bare before me. But just when I thought I was safe, that the light would lead me to a place of peace, everything changed. In the blink of an eye, I was no longer in the tunnel. Suddenly, I wasn't in the tunnel anymore. I was standing on Earth, but not the Earth I knew. Before me stretched a vast city, its skyline darkened by thick, ominous clouds. Towering buildings, once symbols of progress and human achievement, now loomed like silent sentinels, their windows cold and lifeless. The air was heavy, not with smog, but with something unseen, something sinister. I could feel it pressing against my skin, seeping into the very fabric of the world. People moved through the streets, their faces blank, their eyes devoid of life. They were not dead. No, they were breathing, walking, existing, but they were not truly alive. It was as if something had stolen the light from within them, leaving only hollow shells. I tried to speak to them. "Can't you see what's happening?" I asked, my voice trembling. No one looked at me. No one even acknowledged I was there. They just kept moving, their expressions empty, their steps mechanical, as if they were being pulled by invisible strings. And then I saw them. The shadows. They were everywhere, lurking at the edges of alleys, standing behind people, whispering in their ears. They clung to individuals like parasites, their smoky tendrils wrapping around arms, slipping into minds, tightening their grip. But the people, they didn't notice. They didn't care. I watched in horror as the shadows whispered into a man's ear. His posture stiffened, his lips curled into a lifeless smile, and he turned to a large screen that hung above the street. The screen flickered, broadcasting a message: obey, trust, do not question. And just like that, the man nodded and walked on, as if the thought to resist had never even crossed his mind. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is this place?" His expression was filled with sorrow. "It is the world that is coming, if they do not seek the truth." My heart pounded. "Why don't they fight back?" I demanded. "Why don't they see what's happening?" "They no longer want to see," Jesus said softly. "They have chosen comfort over truth, ease over understanding. The shadows do not need to force them into deception. They welcome it." I couldn't breathe. I wanted to grab these people, to shake them, to scream at them until they woke up. But as I reached out, I saw something chilling. The few who resisted, those who dared to question, who tried to break free, were met with overwhelming darkness. The shadows attacked them with relentless fury, suffocating them, isolating them, making them seem like the enemy. A woman stood on the street corner, her hands trembling as she spoke to a small group. "This isn't right," she said, desperation in her voice. "Can't you feel it? Can't you see the lies?" The shadows swarmed her instantly. People turned away. Some jeered, some laughed, but most just ignored her, as if she didn't exist. The moment her voice became too loud, two figures in dark uniforms stepped forward. They grabbed her arms, and in an instant, she was gone. Vanished. Erased. And the city continued as if nothing had happened. I took a step back, my stomach twisting with dread. This is madness. "This is deception," Jesus corrected. "It does not come all at once. It is slow, subtle, and when people accept one lie, it becomes easier to accept the next, until eventually they do not question anything at all. Tears burned in my eyes. But why? Why would they choose this? Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch radiating both sorrow and love. Because the truth requires effort. It requires sacrifice. And in a world that offers ease and illusion, many will not bother to seek it. I shook my head. There has to be hope. There has to be a way to wake them up. There is, he said, but few will listen. I turned to look at the city once more. The people, the shadows, the oppression that had become normal. And I realized the weight of what he was telling me. Not everyone wanted to be saved. Not everyone wanted the truth. And that was the greatest deception of all. And yet, in the midst of all this darkness, the vision was not over. There was more to see, more to understand. Jesus reached for my hand, and the world around me shifted once again. I never imagined I would see the future, but when Jesus took my hand and pulled me into that vision, I knew. This wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. The moment my surroundings shifted, I found myself standing in the middle of a vast crowd. Thousands, maybe millions, of people had gathered, their faces alight with admiration, their voices rising in unified cheers. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, a fervor unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And then he stepped forward. A man, charismatic, captivating. He radiated confidence and power, but not in an overbearing way. No, his presence was welcoming, almost hypnotic. The moment he smiled, the entire world seemed to lean in, drawn to him as if he held the very answers to their soul's deepest questions. I felt it too, that unnatural pull, that magnetic force urging me to believe in him, to trust in him. But deep inside, something twisted in my gut. A warning, an unshakable knowing. This man wasn't just a leader. He was the deceiver. I watched in horror as he spoke, his words smooth as silk, wrapping around the crowd like a gentle embrace. He promised peace, unity, and an end to suffering. He unveiled a new system, one that would merge politics, finance, technology, and even faith into a single, harmonious entity. A world without war, he proclaimed. A world without poverty, without division. No more nations, no more currencies, no more conflicts, only unity, prosperity, and progress. The crowd erupted into cheers. People wanted this. They had been waiting for it. Governments crumbled at his feet, not through war, not through violence, but by their own willing submission. Countries once at odds with each other shook hands. Leaders who had fought bitterly for decades now bowed in allegiance to him. The financial system, long fractured and corrupt, suddenly seemed to stabilize under his wise guidance. A new currency emerged, not physical, not even digital in the way we once knew, but something deeper, embedded, inescapable. I saw people lining up willingly, eagerly, to receive a mark, something more than identification, more than currency. It was access to the new world order. Without it, there was no buying, no selling, no movement. And yet, they didn't resist. They celebrated it. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding. They don't see it, I whispered. They don't understand what they're doing. They believe they are free, he said, his voice tinged with sorrow. But they are more enslaved than ever before. I turned back to the crowd, searching desperately for someone, anyone, who might see the danger. But all I saw were smiling faces, eager hands reaching forward, willing souls giving themselves away, without hesitation. The deceiver stepped onto a massive stage, surrounded by the most powerful men and women in the world. Kings, presidents, religious leaders, they all stood behind him, nodding in agreement. And then, something chilling happened. A shift, a subtle change in his demeanor. His eyes darkened just for a moment, so quick, so fleeting, that if I had blinked, I might have missed it. But I saw it. And in that instant, I knew. This wasn't just a man. This was something else, something ancient, something dark, something evil. I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, to warn them. I wanted to stand on the rooftops and shout, "Do you not see? Do you not understand what you're doing?" But no one would listen, because they were under the spell. "He has given them what they wanted," Jesus said softly. "Not truth, not salvation, but comfort, safety, security." I shook my head. But at what cost? Jesus turned his eyes to me, eyes filled with an unbearable sorrow. Their souls. I couldn't breathe. The vision shifted again, and suddenly, I saw what lay beyond the facade. The people who resisted, the ones who refused to bow, who saw through the deception, were cast out, labeled as threats, enemies of peace. They were hunted, imprisoned, erased. I saw the world turn against them, against anyone who still clung to the truth. Friends betraying friends, families turning on each other, churches collapsing under pressure, trading truth for acceptance, faith for compliance. The deceiver stood at the center of it all, his hands raised as the world worshipped him. Yet, what I saw next made me realize the world was not merely deceived. It was being prepared for something even darker. I thought I knew what deception looked like. Lies, manipulation, false promises. I had seen them all in my lifetime. But when Jesus pulled me into another vision, what he showed me made my stomach twist with dread. I stood in a place that looked like the world I had always known, yet something was terribly wrong. The streets were the same, the buildings unchanged, but the people, they moved differently, spoke differently. There was a uniformity to them, as if something had smoothed out all resistance, all independence. I felt like I was watching a grand performance, where every actor knew their part, their lines, and followed an unseen script without question. Then I saw the screens. They were everywhere. Giant digital billboards, small holographic projections, wrist devices, and implanted chips glowing just beneath the skin. Each screen displayed the same faces, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Their images flickered, their voices calm and reassuring. I listened closely. They weren't the Antichrist. I knew that much immediately. They weren't the ultimate deceivers, but they were part of the plan. Jesus stood beside me, his expression filled with both love and sorrow. "They are not the ones," he said, "but they are preparing the way." A chill ran down my spine. I turned back to the screens. Trump's voice rang out first, confident and commanding. He spoke of restoring order, of fighting against corruption, of making the world great again. He promised freedom, justice, and security. Then Musk's voice followed, softer, more intellectual, almost hypnotic. He spoke of technology, of the next great evolution in human history, of digital identity, artificial intelligence, neural implants, solutions that would make life easier, more connected, more secure. The crowd around me cheered. They believed in this future. They wanted it. And worst of all, they trusted it. I turned to Jesus, my hands trembling. But they're helping, right? They're fighting against the system. They're exposing the lies. Jesus shook his head, number. They are not destroying the system. They are reshaping it. They believe they are leading people toward freedom, but in reality, they are leading them deeper into control. I felt a weight press down on my chest. I had seen this before, the slow creep of deception. It never came with chains and threats. No, it came with promises. It came wrapped in comfort and security. I looked around at the people, their eyes glued to their devices, their hands reaching out eagerly to accept the new order. I saw biometric scanners at every store entrance. People paid with the wave of a hand, a quick scan of their eyes. No cash, no cards, only digital identity. I saw churches, or what used to be churches. Their sermons had changed. No longer did they preach about sacrifice, about following Christ no matter the cost. No longer did they warn of deception. Instead, they preached unity, inclusion, and compliance. They had altered their messages to fit new regulations. I saw the excluded. Not many, just a few. The ones who refused to comply. They stood on the outskirts of society, ignored, invisible. They couldn't buy, couldn't sell. Their homes were taken, their accounts frozen. Some whispered the truth in hushed voices, hiding like criminals. "They are the last ones," Jesus said softly. Tears burned in my eyes. And the rest? They believe they are free. My heart shattered. Because I saw it. I saw how they had been deceived, not by force, not by dictatorship, but by choice, by the illusion of safety, by the comfort of technology, by men who promised them a better world, but had unknowingly delivered them into spiritual slavery. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch both comforting and firm. "The true deceiver is coming," he said, "and when he arrives, they will welcome him." I looked around at the world, at the order that had been established, and I realized it was already too late. But I was wrong. What I had witnessed was only the beginning. The real deception, the one that would redefine faith itself, was still to come. When Jesus showed me the future, I thought I had already seen the worst of it. I thought nothing could shake me more than watching the world embrace control, watching people willingly surrender their freedoms for security. But I was wrong. This was worse. I stood in the middle of a vast city, its streets pristine, its buildings sleek and modern. The world had never looked more advanced, more connected, more peaceful. And yet, beneath the surface, I could feel it, the emptiness, the absence of something vital, something once sacred. Then I saw the churches. They were still there, standing tall on street corners, their doors open wide. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Something was missing. At first glance, everything looked normal. Pews filled with people, preachers standing at the pulpit, choirs singing with beautiful precision. But when I listened closely, really listened, I realized the words were hollow. There was no conviction, no truth. The sermons were carefully crafted, polished, and smooth. There were no warnings of sin, no calls for repentance, no mention of sacrifice. Instead, they preached harmony, acceptance, and self-fulfillment. Faith is personal. Truth is what you make it. The divine is within you. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you in all of this?" His eyes filled with sorrow. "I have been replaced." A cold dread settled into my bones. These weren't churches anymore. They were spiritual centers, places of meditation, positivity, and enlightenment. The cross had been removed from many buildings, replaced with symbols of unity and progress. The Bible was no longer preached. Instead, sermons were built around artificial wisdom, a mixture of feel-good philosophy, technological integration, and artificial intelligence. Yes, AI. I saw it. Massive screens at the front of the church, displaying the face of a digital entity. The people listened as it spoke, its voice soothing, calculated, designed to make them feel comfortable. They had created an artificial god. I wanted to scream. How did this happen? I asked, my voice shaking. Jesus looked around at the crowd, at the people who sat there nodding, smiling, soaking in the lies. They stopped seeking the truth, he said, and when truth is no longer sought, deception is easily embraced. I watched as a man raised his hand, asking the AI pastor a question. How do I know if I'm living the right way? The AI's eyes flickered, then responded in its measured tone. If you feel at peace, then you are on the right path. Trust yourself. Trust the system. We are all one. The congregation nodded in agreement. No one questioned it. No one challenged it. It was a perfect deception because the people thought they were still following God. They had no idea that their faith had been replaced with something manufactured, something controlled. They had traded the power of the Holy Spirit for the comfort of an algorithm. I looked outside the church doors and saw something even more chilling. Those who still held on to real faith, the few who refused to conform, were being pushed out. Their voices weren't silenced through violence, but through irrelevance. They weren't arrested. They were simply excluded. Their churches were labeled as dangerous and divisive. Their teachings were called outdated and extremist. People stopped attending. Donations dried up. Their messages were blocked online, their accounts deleted, their existence erased from the digital world. And so, one by one, they vanished. I turned to Jesus, desperate. But they still believe in something. Doesn't that count for something? He looked at me with infinite sadness. They do not believe in me. Tears burned in my eyes as I saw it so clearly now. Faith had not been abolished. It had been rewritten, transformed into something sterile, controlled, and harmless. A faith that required no sacrifice, no conviction, no truth. A faith that never offended, never challenged, never saved. And the people, they accepted it willingly, because it was easier, because it cost them nothing, because it made them comfortable. I wanted to run into the streets, to shake them, to wake them up. But even as I tried, I could feel their resistance. They didn't want to wake up. They were happy in their deception. And that was the final deception. Not a forced conversion, not an open rebellion against God, but a quiet replacement of the truth, so subtle, so gradual, that no one even noticed it had happened. I felt my body tremble as the vision began to fade. I turned to Jesus one last time, my heart aching with desperation. "What do I do?" I whispered. His voice was steady. "Warn them." The world around me blurred. The artificial churches, the digital sermons, the deceived faces. All of it faded into darkness. And then I woke up, back in my room, back in my time. But now, with a choice. Would I pretend I had seen nothing, ignore the warning, stay silent? Or would I tell the world before it was too late? I had seen the final deception, and now I had to speak. But as the darkness receded, as my consciousness returned, I realized another truth. I was still here. I had returned, carrying with me the memory of what I had seen, carrying a warning the world did not want to hear. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't supposed to be here. 12 minutes. That's how long I was gone, how long my heart had stopped beating. how long I had been somewhere else. I had seen the truth. I had seen the future. And now I was back. The hospital room was bright, the sound of beeping machines filling the air. Doctors and nurses hovered over me, their faces a mixture of shock and relief. I heard them whisper, "She shouldn't be alive," but I was, because I had to warn them. The weight of what I had seen pressed against my chest, heavier than the very breath I had just regained. My hands trembled as I reached for the nurse beside me. "You have to listen," I whispered, my throat raw. "I saw what's coming. It's not what we think. It's worse." She gave me a sympathetic smile, patting my hand gently. "You've been through a lot," she said. "Just rest." Rest? How could I rest? I had just seen the world slip into deception, watched people trade their souls for comfort, watched faith become a shell of what it once was. I had stood beside Jesus himself, and he had shown me what was coming. And now, I was supposed to rest. The moment I was released, I started telling people, friends, family, strangers, anyone who would listen, but no one wanted to hear it. Some nodded politely, their eyes glazing over as if I were telling a fairy tale. Others laughed, chalking it up to a near-death hallucination. "God is in control," they said, as if that was an excuse to do nothing. "Everything will work out," they told me, their voices calm, their lives untouched by urgency. "We don't need to worry. If it's God's will, he'll take care of it." Their blind comfort made me sick. I wanted to shake them, to make them understand. I had been there. I had seen the deception taking hold, seen how the world was walking willingly into spiritual slavery. I had watched as faith was rewritten, as technology was embraced as the new savior, as people who clung to the truth were erased, forgotten, and yet, here they were, sipping their coffee, scrolling their phones, ignoring it all. I tried harder. I stood in churches, pleading with congregations. "Your faith is being replaced," I cried. "It won't happen overnight. It won't come in chains and threats. It will come in comfort, in security, in convenience. And by the time you realize you've traded your soul, it will be too late." They smiled, nodding at my passion, but they didn't act. Pastors reassured their flocks, preaching comfort instead of truth. "God wouldn't let that happen," they said. "He loves us too much." I clenched my fists. Didn't he warn us? Didn't he say many would be deceived? Didn't he say the path is narrow, that few would find it? Some paused, some considered, but most turned away, because the truth was too uncomfortable. I tried the media, sent letters, reached out, shared my story. No one cared. No one listened. If anything, I became the problem. I was labeled crazy, a conspiracy theorist, a fanatic. Doctors suggested I was experiencing trauma-induced delusions. Friends stopped calling. Family avoided the topic altogether. And still, the world moved forward toward the very future I'd seen. Digital systems expanded. Churches softened their messages. AI integrated into spiritual discussions. People embraced it, the control, the monitoring, the gradual erosion of personal faith. And I realized the warning wasn't enough, because people didn't want to be warned. They wanted to believe they were safe. That was the greatest lie of all. I wept, not because I was ignored, not because I was mocked, but because I could see it so clearly, and they could not. Jesus had shown me the final deception, and the world was walking straight into it, hands open, hearts unguarded, smiling. I thought about stopping, about letting it go, but I couldn't, because I had died. I had stood before Jesus, seen his sorrow, heard his warning. And now, no matter how much they ignored me, I had to speak. Because when the day comes, when they realize what they have done, they will remember my words. And maybe then, just maybe, they will wake up before it's too late. But as the days passed, a terrifying realization settled in. I was alone in this. At first, I thought I was alone. I had died for 12 minutes, crossed into another reality, stood in the presence of Jesus himself, and returned with a message that burned inside me. But when I tried to tell people, they brushed me off. God is in control, they said. You had a near-death experience, that's all. You should just move on. Their words hit like stones. Friends, family, even the people I once trusted most, urged me to let it go. They wanted me to be the person I was before I died, before my eyes were opened. But I couldn't go back. I had seen too much. I had seen the world walking blindly into deception. I had watched faith dissolve into a hollow, artificial version of itself. I had seen how control would creep in, not through force, not through open war, but through acceptance, through the illusion of safety, of unity, of progress. And I knew most people wouldn't realize it until it was too late. So I kept speaking. I kept warning, even when they rolled their eyes, even when they changed the subject, even when they stopped answering my calls. But then, something changed. It started with a message, just one. A woman I barely knew reached out, her words filled with hesitation and fear. I don't know if I'm crazy, but I think I saw something too. Then came another. I had a dream about the future. It was so real, and it felt like a warning. More followed. Messages, emails, whispered conversations after church, in grocery store aisles, in parking lots. I don't know why, but something feels wrong. I can't explain it, but I feel like we're being lied to. I had a vision, like the world was changing, but no one could see it. People who once dismissed me were now experiencing it themselves. And then the world started shifting. It was subtle at first. Small changes in the news, new policies, new technology that promised to make life easier, more secure. People celebrated it, embraced it. But those of us who had seen the truth, we knew better. We saw what it really was: control. A quiet, creeping system designed to strip away freedom, not all at once, but little by little, until people willingly accepted their own chains. Biometric payments replaced cash. Digital IDs became mandatory. Churches softened their messages, removing anything that might be offensive or divisive. And those who questioned it, silenced, labeled as extremists, pushed to the edges of society. I watched people wake up, one by one, then in groups. Those who had once ignored me now came to me, desperate for answers. You were right. What do we do? How do we stop this? But for every person who saw the truth, there were 10 more who refused to look. Some of my closest friends still begged me to let it go. You're obsessed, Barbara. You're scaring people. The world isn't perfect, but it's not some big conspiracy. It would have been easier to give in, to stop fighting, to pretend I didn't know what was coming. But Jesus had shown me, and I had a choice. Would I be silent? Would I back down just because the world wanted me to? Or would I stand, even if it meant losing everything? I thought back to the vision, the artificial churches, the digital God, the controlled faith. I thought of the people blindly walking toward it, believing they were free, believing they were still following him. And I knew I couldn't stop. I had to keep warning them, even if they ignored me, even if they laughed, even if it cost me everything, because the day was coming when they would finally see it. And when that day arrived, they would remember my words. And maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be too late. I am already dead. I have crossed the boundary between life and death, and what I saw on the other side was not an illusion. It was the truth, a truth the world is trying to hide, a truth that only those who open their eyes can see. I have warned you. I have told you what Jesus revealed. I have shown you how the world is slipping deeper into deception, bit by bit, so gently and pleasantly that no one realizes they are being manipulated. But now the question is no longer, is this real? The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you continue to live as if nothing is happening? Keep believing that everything will be fine without being watchful, without standing up to defend your faith? Will you wake up and prepare to take action? I am not here to spread fear. I am not here to convince you. I am here to warn you. But have you heard it? Are you brave enough to face the truth? If you too feel that something is changing, if your heart stirs as you hear these words, comment below. Let me know if you feel the same, if you too are seeing the signs around us. Like, share, and subscribe now, because I will continue sharing the messages that God has shown me. If we spread this truth together, many will be warned before it's too late. God is calling you. Do you hear Him? Act now, and let Him bless you for your faithfulness and courage.